What types of foods are you guilty of eating without even realizing you're eating them? What types of foods can you not just eat one and have to power through the bag or the box? Hey, have you ever found yourself elbow deep into a bag of chips, wondering what in the hell just happened? It's not your fault. The modern food industry has turned eating into a science and not in a good way. And welcome back to the Obesity Project. My name is Dr. Mark Shankman. Today, episode 27, Hijacked Hunger, How Food Companies Manipulate You into Overeating. And so, this was a topic that I felt like we really needed to talk about because food has been scientifically created in labs to be hyper palatable, and they are absolutely manufactured to help you overeat, to never feel satiated, and to continue to eat those foods over and over and over again and be absolutely addicted to them, to allow you to keep buying over and over and over again. And really, what these food companies are doing is they're putting their profits over your health, and that should not be allowed. There's a couple things that I think in the world that are absolutely criminal. I don't think that medical insurance should be a for-profit company. I don't think big pharma should dictate how medicine is done and practiced in this country. And three, food companies should not be able to generate or create foods that make you buy it over and over and over again constantly in order to, appease, profit margins over the health of the people that are eating it. So these are all the problems. This was an important topic. You see, even Newsweek wrote a report on it. So let's dive into the rise of these ultra processed foods. So first, we have to create a definition of what ultra processed means. These are foods that are made from industrial ingredients, not natural foods. These are industrial ingredients, things like refined starches, added sugars, fats, emulsifiers, flavorings, preservatives. All of these things make foods ultra processed, and they're made in a lab, not grown in a field or taken from animals. So examples of ultra processed, highly refined foods, things like chips, cookies, sugary drinks, fast food, frozen meals, anything that comes in a box, a bag, or has a barcode are things that you should absolutely stay away from. And I stole that from my good friend, Dr. Ben Bickman. I love his quote of, just avoid anything that comes in boxes, bags, or barcodes. Um, and so an important statistic for you, over 60% of calories in the American diet come from not only carbohydrates, but from ultra processed foods. And there was a study by Montero et al. In 2018 that they actually calculated this and found that over 60% of the American diet comes from these ultra processed foods, as I mentioned. These foods are engineered, not created, but engineered in a lab for hyperpalatability. As I mentioned, these kind of tell your brain that you cannot get enough of this stuff. And hyperpalatability means that in the lab they create a food or a food like substance, because I don't even think you can call these foods, with a perfect combination of salt, sugar, and fat to literally hijack the brain. That's really what they're doing here. So let's get into a little bit of the science of craveability. So there's this term called Bliss Point Engineering, and this is what they're shooting for. This is what every food scientist is working on. And it was coined by a gentleman named Howard Moskowitz, who was a food scientist. And he coined it because it was, again, the precise combination of sugar, fat, and salt to not only maximize people wanting to eat it, but maximizing dopamine release. And dopamine release, you may be aware, is our body's reward system, our brain's reward system. And dopamine is how our body gets rewarded for doing things like checking something off a list of things to do, but it also is a huge source of addiction. And all addictive processes or drugs and alcohol and all these things all release high levels of dopamine, and you need more and more and more dopamine to then get the same effect. And these hyperpalatable foods do the exact same thing. They maximize dopamine release, and they do this in studies. They research this. They actually look at this, in MRIs and things like that to look at what is actually happening to the people that are eating these foods. And it makes them absolutely irresistible and never satisfying. That's the main thing. You got to keep coming back more and more and more. You've got to eat more and more of it. This is sort of why you can't open a pack of Pringles and just eat one. It's almost impossible. The food is irresistible. It never satisfies you. You can go through can after can after can, and it's built that way. It's made that way. It's engineered that way in the lab. There was a study by Avena et al. In 2008, which demonstrated hyperpalatable foods light up the brain just like drugs. So dopamine spikes in the nucleus accumbens, which is an area of the brain that we see. Dopamine spikes when you gamble, when you use drugs, when you use alcohol, when you watch social media right now. But you're learning something, so you're using it in a positive way. But when you do anything that has the potential for abuse, pornography and other stuff, all of these things light up the brain in the same places as this hyperpalatable food does. There's also a term called vanishing caloric density. So these are foods that melt in your mouth, things like Cheetos or ice cream. What these foods actually do is they trick the brain into thinking that you didn't eat very much, right? So if the food melts in your mouth, it's almost like you didn't eat it. And the brain is searching for more. It makes you think that you just didn't really eat that much of that food. And so the result is you get less satiety and overconsumption. So the less satisfied you are, the more you're going to eat. You're going to continue to eat, continue to eat. You want to eat until you're full. That's generally how eating works. But in these products and these items, these types of foodstuffs, I can't even call them food, because you have less satiety, it makes you overconsume them. And of course, this then leads to obesity and insulin spikes and insulin resistance, chronic disease, all those things that I always talk about. So there was a study by Rolls et al. In 2002, which demonstrated that a low satiety index of ultra-processed foods then leads to an increase in caloric intake, which of course then leads to obesity. So there's also some conditioning and some food cues that I'd like to cover. So things like bright colors, cartoon mascots, jingles, smells, all of these things all create powerful conditioned responses. All of these things get you thinking of craving for these foods. So, I'm 56. Back in my childhood, I remember, lots of food mascots, things like the Frosted Flakes, I forget exactly, Tony the Tiger, things like that were all, I've got my dogs jumping in on the video, all, triggering you to think about Frosted Flakes, to want Frosted Flakes, to go to the cabinet, pull out the Frosted Flakes and begin eating it, even if you weren't hungry, even if it wasn't breakfast time. These are conditioned responses. You're also taught to crave these foods emotionally and physiologically. And so this isn't just psychological, this is emotional and physiological as well. And there was a study by Harris et al. In 2009 where food ads significantly increased snacking behavior, especially in children, which is the most damaging. And of course, since the late 70s, we've seen nothing but an increase in childhood obesity and childhood insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, all these things that children should never have, as at their age. They shouldn't experience this. These are things that typically that we see in older age. And this is simply because these bright colors, these cartoon mascots, these jingles, things like that, all increase snacking behavior and increase obesity. So we also have some nutrient dilution and the drive to eat more. So ultra processed foods are calorie dense. They have lots and lots of calories, but they're absolutely nutrient poor. They are devoid of any significant nutrients. And so what happens then is your body keeps sending these hunger signals out because the micronutrient needs of your body aren't being met. You're not getting the micronutrients that you need. You're not even getting many of the macronutrients. You're really only getting carbohydrates for the most part. But so your brain is basically saying there's not enough nutrients in our blood. We can't feed the cells of our body properly. So those hunger signals continue to go out saying to eat more because you're still deficient in these micronutrients. There was also a study by Hall et al. In 2019 out of the NIH where the participants were placed on ultra processed diets and they consumed 500 more calories per day of those on the unprocessed diets. And despite equal um, protein, fat, and carbs, they got 500 more calories a day as a result of eating these processed foods. So they weren't, so they were eating the proper macronutrients, but they weren't getting the proper micronutrients, which led to them eating about 500 more calories a day. All right, so let's talk about addiction and withdrawal. I think I've touched on this a couple times, but things like sugar, refined carbs, and hyperpalatable foods create real addiction-like responses. Sugar addiction is absolutely a real thing. And I just learned the other day, which is kind of sad, that there is no ICD-10 code or medical codes in this country, in the United States, for sugar addiction. Yet the WHO has a a sugar addiction medical code that allows for doctors to bill and treat sugar addiction. So they recognize it as an actual addiction. Yet in this country, in America, we don't see it as a real medical problem. And of course, doctors don't really understand sugar addiction. They don't believe in it. There's no medical code to bill for it. So why are they going to waste their time talking about something they don't know a lot about, they don't fully understand, and they can't bill for, right? So we've got to do something about that. Some of the symptoms of sugar addiction and withdrawal are cravings, hyper-irritability, and of course, compulsive and binge eating. So there was a study by Gerhardt et al. In 2011. They used a Yale food addiction scale. They used it to diagnose addiction to processed foods. So in addition to addiction and withdrawal, we've got some hormonal chaos that ensues from these products as well. So things like insulin spikes due to the refined carbohydrates. So let's touch on that for a minute. I mentioned this in other videos, but it bears to kind of go over here again. So when you take a natural food like wheat and you strip it, you bleach it, you strip it, you have fiber, you pulverize it into a super fine powder. Now you're taking a whole food, you're stripping away all the nutrients, you're stripping away all of the protective mechanisms in that food. You're pulverizing into a super highly refined carbohydrate that can be rapidly absorbed from the stomach into the bloodstream. And what's going to happen with that huge insulin spike is it's going to signal your body to take those carbs and shove them into fat storage to store it away for later use. And again, remember that if insulin levels are high, if you have a hyperinsulinemia, then the only thing your body can do with extra calories or food energy coming in is to store it away for future use. Even if you have plenty of fat stored on your body, even if your blood has low blood sugar and is telling you you need to use that food energy right now with that high insulin, you're going to forced to shove it into fat stores and not be able to utilize it and burn it as energy. One of the other things that happens is you get a leptin resistance. So basically what leptin resistance is in a nutshell, in sort of layman's terms, is your brain simply can't hear the I'm full signal. Your body now begins to tune out leptin, which tells your body that you've reached a level of satiety and that you do not need to eat anymore. You also get, in addition to that, you get ghrelin dysregulation, which is the hunger hormone. And so you're hungrier sooner. And, all of this leads to overeating. So, some evidence that food designs fuel overeating. There was a study by Small et al. In 2019 that demonstrated that ultra processed foods impair the brain's reward system and its satiety signals. So, if you impair the brain's reward system and these foods continually hit those areas of the brain that are triggering dopamine release, and you impair the ability to listen to the body's natural satiety signals or hormones, then that's going to cause you to completely overeat. There was another study by Ledwig and Ebeling in 2020 that the carbohydrate insulin model shows that processed carbs drive fat storage independent of calorie count. So this is not a problem of intake of calories, that it's a problem of hormonal regulation, right? If your hormones are telling you to take every calorie coming in, whether you're eating 1,000 calories, 2,000 calories, or 100 calories, if all your hormones are telling you to drive that into storage, you're going to do nothing but store that energy as fat, and you're going to become more obese. So that study demonstrated that, carbohydrates triggering the insulin uh, levels to increases and drives fat storage independent of calorie count. So let's talk a little bit about the psychology of overeating as well. That certainly plays a part. If anybody out there has ever eaten because they feel bad and they want to soothe themselves, then psychology is a big part of overeating. Um, so portion size manipulation has absolutely been a huge problem in the United States. We are the absolute super size culture. I remember the very last time, it's been a while actually since I've gone to the Cheesecake Factory, but I used to be amazed when they would come out with these plates that were this big and, these massive, massive meals that honestly I could eat a pretty good portion. And when I got the food from Cheesecake Factory, I almost always ate half of it, not because I wasn't, not because I wanted to save it, but because I just simply couldn't eat anymore. And the other half would come home with me, and I would eat it as a second meal. We are a supersized culture in this country. We've got to start to look at our portion sizes. I personally have not, and I'm dying to go, but I personally have not been to Europe, but I've heard many instances where you go to Europe and the portions are so much smaller, and Americans are like, man, where's my food? This isn't going to fill me up. This isn't going to allow me to be full. We've also been sort of health washed through marketing, and health washed meaning we've been told that things are healthy that are not truly healthy. We've been brainwashed to some degree that foods that are unhealthy are actually healthy for us. Things like low fat and terms like natural or whole grain doesn't actually mean that the foods are healthy. And in many instances, they've been processed and refined, and they're not healthy anymore. And then, of course, we've got a complete convenient bias, meaning that if it's easy access, we eat it pretty mindlessly. So, we don't think anything of taking some, highly processed foods, pulling it out of the freezer, throwing it in the microwave, eating, and then, you're like, man, that wasn't enough. Eating in front of the TV and you look down and the food's gone. You're like, I don't even remember eating it. So throw some more in there, eat another bag of microwave popcorn, eat another, bag of chips. If it's easy, you're just going to keep reaching for more and more and you're going to overeat. All right. So what can you do about this hyper palatable food? One, you have to have awareness. You've got to recognize that you're being manipulated and that you're being manipulated by these food companies that are they're designing food to make you overeat. So you have to recognize that you're being manipulated and you have to be aware of the problem first. Secondly, you want to go ahead and eat whole foods. You want to prioritize single ingredient items. If the product has more than one ingredient, it is not a whole food. If it's got a label, if it's got a, something on it that's telling you what's inside that food, it is not a whole food. It is not a real food. You've got to prioritize these whole foods. You've got to learn to read labels. You've got to avoid things like hidden sugars and seed oils and flavorings. Here's one thing that I learned that was really frightening and is kind of criminal if you ask me that these food companies can do this. But if something says natural or artificial flavoring, the artificial you get, but natural flavors. Natural flavors can mean almost anything. Natural flavors mean they could put sugar in it. Natural flavors mean they can put flavoring that is actually industrial and chemically created, but made to taste like another flavor, and it can be considered a natural flavor. Or, natural and artificial flavors kind of go together, but um, these are things that should not be allowed to be kind of hidden away in false advertising in the nutrition or ingredient labels. And then finally, you want to practice mindful eating. You want to remove the distractions. You want to slow yourself down. You want to chew thoroughly. Don't eat in front of the television. You don't even really see what you're eating. You're not even aware that you ate and you just don't feel as full. Slowing down allows you to process that food, allows your stomach to slowly expand. That expansion of your stomach then releases satiety hormones that will allow you to feel more full. Chewing your food thoroughly breaks it down, helps with digestion, and all of these things will help you to keep from overeating these types of foods. So, if food has ever felt like it's controlling you and not the other way around, then this episode was meant for you. What types of foods are you guilty of eating without even realizing you're eating them? What types of foods can you not just eat one and have to power through the bag or the box? What types of foods do you find yourself standing at a counter, looking out a window? Maybe it's late at night, you're in your underwear, you're freaking buck naked, and you're eating, like a tub of ice cream or something. What types of foods are you guilty of doing? And doing these kind of, bad behaviors, these things that are not healthy, not good for you. Drop that in a comment below. I would love to find out what foods you struggle with, what situations you find yourself in. And also, feel free to share this video and tag someone who needs to know the truth of what's inside their pantry. We need to share the information. We need to let people know that we live in a toxic food environment and that we need to do something about it. And we can. We need to increase awareness. We need to learn to read labels. We need to be mindful of the way we eat. We need to eat whole foods, all these things that I talked about. But we need to increase awareness and make people realize that these foods, it's not their fault. It's not your fault that you're overeating. It's been designed, that food is designed in a lab to make you overeat, to never feel full, to never get enough. And make sure to share this video with someone that is not aware of that and needs to be. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Like, share, and comment. Feel free to spread the word. If you enjoy my channel, my videos, feel free to share them. I would certainly appreciate that. And make sure to subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Thanks so much for watching.